Okay, good morning, good afternoon. Welcome everyone. This is the Forge training for .NET, and this is the first day where we are going to run how to view models using the Forge APIs. My name is Augusto Goncalves. I'm a Forge advocate at Autodesk. So, sorry, let me come back here. Sorry, just going to the first slide. My name is Augusto Goncalves. I'm a Forge advocate at Autodesk, and I'll be the presenter today. I also have here with me one of my colleagues that will be helping with Q&A. So you can see at the bottom of the screen. Yeah. Oh, hi, Joao. Good morning. Good afternoon.
Good morning.
And you can see at the bottom of your screen on the Zoom toolbar, you can see a Q&A button. That's where you can post your questions. We are going to do our best to answer all of your questions as we go. And just post your question. You can also raise your hand to ask to open the microphone, but if you have something to ask as well. So Q&A or raise your hand. All right, so what is this about the week? So this week we have 4 days, 4 tutorials from the learnforge.autodesk.io tutorials. We are running tracks in .NET, .NET Core, and Node.js, so you can choose. So today, this track here is about .NET. There is another track going on at the same time with one of my colleagues, Jaime Rosales. He is presenting Node.js, so our track is .NET Core. We will hold 4 sessions during the day. So now it's 8 a.m. Pacific. We're going to talk about 30 minutes, show what you need to do and what are the steps. And we will give you 1 hour and a half roughly and be back at 10 a.m. Pacific. And you can convert to your own time zone. We're back at 10 a.m. to go for the next session. And again, 30 minutes and then 2 hours later and 2 hours later. During each session, we are going to code and answer questions that you might have and give you time to complete the task and do your other things. We know that you have other work, you have something to do today, so you have some time to do that as well. And in between sessions, you can work on your code, and we will leave this webinar running, and you can just submit your questions on the Q&A. And as soon as we are back, we are going to answer the questions. So you have those breaks that you can work on your code and submit your questions. So today is April 13, upload and translate and view models. Tomorrow we'll be showing how to access BIM 360 models and ACC, which is the same. Thursday, April 15, we are going to show how to extend the viewer and build dashboards. And Friday, last day, how to modify your models. Let's start with day one. Today training is about upload, translate, and view, and this is the first session of the day. The purpose of today's training is to create an application just like this here, where you can see your buckets on the left, but you can understand the bucket as a folder where you can upload your files. So I create a bucket with this folder, and then I upload a file to my bucket. And I then hit translate to prepare that file for viewing, and then I can view that on the viewer. As I mentioned, that's the first session, 8 a.m. to 8:30, and we'll follow the day 8, 10, 12, and 2 p.m., which is the last session of the day. Okay, so going forward for the first piece of it, what we need to do to prepare our environment to create the application for today. You need a Forge account at forge.autodesk.com, and we need a Forge app. After you create your account, you can create your app under your apps page. To create your Forge account, you actually need an Autodesk account, and that's actually your first step to do. After that, we also need a Visual Studio on our machine, and you can use the Community Edition 2019, that's the latest. And if you don't have that installed, install that right now and select ASP.NET Web Development and .NET Desktop Development. The second .NET Desktop Development is actually used Friday, But it's a good thing to have as well, because if you're doing .NET, you are most likely going to use that one. So there is a question if you can use Visual Studio Code instead. Actually, you can, but it's not ideal. So today's training, we're going to be using the Community Edition, which is for Windows, right? Visual Code runs on Windows and Mac Linux as well, but doesn't have all the wizards you can have on the Community Edition. So for today's training, I would recommend using the Community Edition. Later, if you want to use the Visual Code, you can also do it, but it's not ideal. It's not the best tool we have for .NET development. Okay, thank you, James. All right, so let's go for demo time. What do we need to install and what do we need to create? Let me switch to my environment here. So as I said, the first thing to do is to go to our to the Forge website. So forge.autodesk.com. And if this is your first time, click on the sign in. And if you that's where you sign in with your Autodesk account. If you don't have an Autodesk account, go under create account and fill your data here, email, etc., and create your account. As soon as you are done creating the account, go back or click on the sign in to go back to the first page, and here you can type in your Autodesk credentials. So I'm using my Gmail account at gmail.com and hit next, and my password. Oops. All right, so if this is your very first time logging in, this page should be empty. So in this case, as I already created apps in the past, I have 3 apps here. But in your case, most likely this will be empty and there is no app yet. Right? So what you do is go to create application. So that's the first thing we have to do here. And you can select the APIs you are going to use if you have a fine control over that. But as we're just doing this for testing and we don't know yet what we are going to use, you can definitely select all of the APIs. There is no cost selecting the APIs. You can select as much as you want, right? The cost usage is on the cost is on the usage, not on the APIs you select. So select everything or just leave it as is, right? And let's go to the name of the application, and let's say day 1, and this is the callback URL, and we are going to use this one here. And don't worry, you don't have to memorize this. I'm going to show you where you can get that information just in a moment. And let's create our application. And that's all we have to do here. Just give it a moment. What we really need is what's coming on the next page. And yeah, okay, there we go. So what we really need on this page is the client ID and the client secret. So the client ID is just like your login, and the client secret is just like your password. And it's very important to keep the password protected, so you don't want to give that away. The client ID is okay, you need to share that at some point on your application development. And if you have any suspicion that anyone have copied your client secret, you can regenerate that and create a new secret. So if you do that, you probably have to reset that on your application as well. So that's what we need here. Let's leave this page open and let's go to the next one. So if I go back to my PowerPoint, you see that I need visualstudio.microsoft.com and visualstudio.microsoft.com. And as that was the question from James, right? Can I use Visual Code? Yes, but it's not ideal. So in this case, you're going to use the Visual Studio for Windows right here. So you drop down and go to the community. So community will do for all we need here. If you have a subscription and want to use professional or enterprise, it's also valid. But for today, community should be enough. So click here and install, follow the steps. That should be what you need. After you install, you should have the icon just like this, and you click on Visual Studio 2019, and you should see a list of projects you have created in the past. So this should be empty for you, and what we're looking for is this create new project right here. Okay, so as I said, everything here is actually described in a tutorial. You don't have to memorize everything. You can start doing that yourself. So learn forge.autodesk.io. That's what we are following today. And what I just did is before we start coding and tools. So before you start coding, you have the page to create your application, to create your Forge login and create your app, and the tools you need. In this case, we are using .NET Core and Visual Studio Community, and the options you have to choose. So let me copy this and let me paste on the, there is a chat window as well. Let me send that to everyone. And yes. And as I said, the callback URL is right here. If you go to before you start coding, creating an app, here is the everything you need, including the callback URL, which is right here. But let me copy that and paste on the chat window as well. So what is this callback URL, right? So for today, this is not used, but tomorrow we will need that. The callback URL is what is called after you sign in with your Autodesk account. So on tomorrow's training, we're going to use this. So you may ask, okay, why am I using this today? Why am I setting this variable today? This is just best practice. Do that for all of your applications. We actually use this same callback URL on all of our samples. So if you have that for your application, you can use the same credentials on all of our samples, because we always use the same callback URL. So it's just standard to make life easier. That's the reason we use localhost. Localhost is your machine, but that's the reason we use 3000 API Forge callback OAuth to be the same on all of our samples and all of our tutorials. So everything is in here. Learn forge.autodesk.io, and we just completed before we start coding and tools. It may take a few minutes to install Visual Community, so please start that now. And if you have any questions, we will help you. You can post your questions on the Q&A. Okay, so what's next? So this is your turn. Now it's your time to create your Forge account, create your Autodesk account if you need, create your Forge application, and install the development tools, Visual Studio 2019, and make sure that you can create projects there. If you're feeling that you want to move to the next steps, you are welcome to do so. On the next hour at 10 a.m. Pacific, we'll be back here to do the next step of the tutorial and show you how to do it. We are going to do the basic server and authentication piece of our code. And if you want to post your questions, there is the Q&A at the bottom. Just paste your question there. And we'll be back at 10 a.m. to complete the next step. And let me look at the Q&A, the questions again on the chat. Any chance in allowing a reset of the free trial, Arif? So Arif, the best way actually is for you to, once you are ready to move to a subscription, you can also use a different account if you're not using that today for the same purpose of trial. But if you still have credits on your account, you can definitely extend that. But at some point you have to move to subscription. So what I would ask you is to send me your email address used to create your account. If you want to do that on Zoom, make sure to use the to panelist only, so we are not sharing your email, and we can definitely extend that for you. But you have to at some point move to a subscription. So yeah, please send me your email. Let's take care of that. Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, so let me okay, so welcome. This is session number 2. I saw that you posted some questions on the chat window. We tried to answer most of them, but it's essentially about the tutorial that we are following. So today we are following the .NET Core tutorial. There is a .NET Framework version of that, which should produce the same end result. If you are unclear which one to choose, I would say to go with .NET Core. That's the newest technology. That's where Microsoft is going, and that's what we are using here. And we are now starting session number 2. And before we start, let's see if you have any other questions. Did you manage to complete previous step? Do you have your account created? You have your Visual Studio community installed? Anything else that we can help? You can raise your hand, you can post on the Q&A or the chat window, whatever works for you. And let's move forward. Okay, so step number 2 is about creating a project and setting up the environment variables, creating the basic server for our application, and the authentication piece of our code. And as I said, all of the tutorial is available on the Learn Forge tutorial. So that's where we're going to get the code and the actual steps you have to follow. So let's see how to complete those steps and do a guided demo of it. So let's go to the tutorial right here. And we are on the View Your Models section. And we are going to complete the Create a Server piece. And for all of the steps, you always have to choose the language you are going to use. So in our case, we're going to use .NET Core. So let me move this to the side and go back here. And it's not maximizing. Let me try again. Okay, now we have it. And this will be right here. All right. There was a question before about Visual Code, which is also possible. There is a small tutorial on how to use on non-Windows environment, if you have something like this. But essentially, we're going to Visual Studio and going to select a new project of type ASP.NET Core Web Application. You can do that by clicking on Create New Project, or if you continue without code, right here, is going to open Visual Studio. Let me resize here and hide this for now. We're going to File, New Project, and we select ASP.NET Core Web Application. If it's not here, you can just type and search here, ASP Core Web Application. Let's click Next. This is the name of our application. We're using Forge sample just because in some of the tutorials, this name is actually important. For this one, is not that important, but on other samples, that's relevant. So use what we suggest, right? Otherwise, you have to rename some things later. Okay, so let's hit Create. And the next window will ask us to select what type of project we are using. So .NET Core, ASP.NET Core 3.1, and we are going to use empty for now. So there are a few other options if you have a different setup, but empty means that we are going to create what we need, and it's a very basic one. We're not using Angular or React or anything like that, but you can use Forge with React applications, but it's not part of this tutorial today. And we are going to disable HTTPS just because we are running on localhost, and that will just complicate a few things. We don't need HTTPS for now. And let's hit Create. So just complete this first piece. Let's scroll down. Now we have to install the packages we are going to use. So if we expand the Solution Explorer, right click on our project and go to manage NuGet packages. That should open this window. We're going to browse the Autodesk Forge right here and right here, and hit install. We also need the Microsoft Newtonsoft JSON that will help us handle JSON strings. We have to also install a few additional packages. Just hit OK. And come back here and paste. And that should be the other one. Install. Oh yeah, it's not 5 because .NET is now 5, right? So we are using 3.1, 14, install. Accept. Okay, that should be it. Now, yeah, that's a good point. You have to install the 3.1 version, which is compatible with the .NET 3.1 that we have. Okay, scrolling down. Now we have to add our environment variable. So this is really important. So let's right click on our project again and scroll all the way down to, oops, sorry. I had a window of my screen. So right click and go to properties. And let me hide this again. Oh, sorry about that. Go to debug, and we have to add a few environment variables to use our application. So let's select the ASP.NET Core URL, which should be added here, and the value should be localhost 3000. That's what we're going to use, and add one more, the client ID. And the client ID is coming from our application. So let's go back to our application. And that's the one we just created today. Let's copy this and paste in here. Oops. Be very careful to avoid copying mistakes. And let's go back to the tutorial. Client secret. And paste in here. And go back to our for website and copy from here and paste in here. So it's, as I said, this is very important. Do not share your client secret, right? I'm going to refresh this after we're done here. And last is the callback URL. As I mentioned, we're not going to use the callback URL today. We're just adding that here to keep it consistent, but tomorrow we are going to use it, right? So this callback URL from here should be the exact same in here. All right, so last, fix the port 3000, and that should be it, right? Launch browser, the environment variables, the app URL, and the options here. So let's hit save to not lose anything. Next step, we are going to the startup and add in the MVC. We're going to use that for our static files. So let's click here, go to our startup, and add this missing namespace we need. Last, we're going to replace the contents of the startup with this content here. So you see that what we have here is just using development and it's showing reload word. So that's okay, right? It's working, but it's not what we're looking for. So what we want is to have static default files, which is the index static, and use MVC, where we have the interface and the APIs on the back. So let's copy, or just click here to copy and replace the contents of this class right here. Let's delete and paste. Grab the space and save. So that should complete the server piece. Now, if we run our application, it should compile and run, but there is nothing there yet. This is just a basic server. So we have the way to serve files, we have the static, the environment variables, and we have the the references we need to run our code later. So let's move next to the next piece, which is the we have to do one more step. We have to create the controllers folder before we move to the next step. So let's right click here and add a new folder, and the name controllers is just no standard again. And let's move to the authentication piece. So the authentication is where you provide Autodesk your ID and secret, and Autodesk will give you back the access token. With that access token, you can then request the data that you want. We are using the two-legged approach, meaning that this is just you as an application and Autodesk as the host managing the data. The other option is a three-legged, when there is you as an application, Autodesk as the host, and the user with the permissions. But in this case, we don't have a user, a Autodesk user yet. We just have the application and Autodesk hosting the data. For every step, you have to select the language. So in this case, .NET Core, click here. So what we have to do is to create this OAuth controller.cs. So go to the controllers folder, right click and add new controller. And we are going to select API controller empty and hit add. And the name should be as described here, OAuth controller. Let me replace this and hit add. So Visual Studio is doing this thing, it's creating a few additional folder things. So let's look at the code, right? So the code is creating this API controller, which has two tokens, one internal and one public. The internal token is actually the read and write token. The public token is the view only token for the client side, the browser. So our application will have a code run on the server that will upload and download files, but the browser will actually see the modules, and the browser needs permission to see the files. So that's why we have this view only token for the browser only. And if we scroll down and move a bit to the side, we can see that we have this public token is viewables read only, which is safe for the browser environment. And if you look at the internal and we expand here, we see that this has a create and read and write, delete, all the the dangerous stuff is here, right? So we should keep the internal read write token to the server side only, not to the client. And this is the code that will actually connect to Autodesk, send your ID and secret, and get the token. And this is just a piece of code to get the environment variables from our project settings. We use environment variables here because it's possible to do that from the property panel, as we did, right? It's right here on the, let me go back right here and go to properties. The environment variables are here, so it's very convenient. And because it works on different hosting options. For instance, if you use Azure, AWS, Heroku, all of those support environment variables. So it's very convenient and works here, and that's why we use this. There are many other options to store credentials. So this is just something that is simple and works on different ways. All right, what we have to do is to get this code, copy, and go to our newly created controller. There is some skeleton code here that we don't need. This is just namespaces and the base class. We don't need that. Let's get rid of all of this and replace our content. So that should be the actual access token working. So let's try to run it. Let's get this here. That's the token. Let's copy this and run with IIS. And as soon as it's done, it should open the browser. The local host 3000 at the host does not have anything. But if I add the endpoint for my access token, I should see my access token right here. So you see that's my access token to access the information on Forge. So I can see that my code is working, the authentication is working, and it's all good so far. So this is the authentication piece. And this token here is read-only, expires in 1 hour. And yeah, that's it. So we have our authentication piece completed. Any questions? see on the Q&A. All right. Can you change the timeout setting for the token? No, the timeout, yeah, you cannot change the timeout. The timeout is default. You have to refresh the access token every time it expires. If you look at the code, you see that our code right here will get the new access token, and right here get the access, get it and return to the client, right? It's interesting that there is this small check here to check if the access token is expired or not. And if it's not expired, we'll just return what we have. If it is expired, we'll get a new one. So our code is optimized or somehow optimized to avoid refresh the token every time. So it's only doing that when it's needed. So yeah, don't worry about that. Thank you for the question. Shobit, hope I'm saying this right. Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, yeah, that's correct. Thank you. Okay, so I will leave you now to complete this step to create your project, set up the environment variables, create the server, startup.cs, and create the OAuth controller. And there is one more question. Let's see. When I go through the tutorial.NET Core, I don't have the two-legged as an option, only three-legged. I go from creating the app to authorize, not authenticate. Okay, so Charles Dodson, you're probably following the second tutorial, not the first tutorial, right? So the first tutorial, view your modules and create server. .NET Core. At the very end, you see authenticate, which is two-legged. If you by mistake go to the second tutorial, which is tomorrow class, create a server, .NET Core, at the end you see authorize, which is a bit different, right? So we are doing the first one, view your modules. So create a server, authenticate. That's where we are today. That's where we are right now on this step here. Tomorrow we'll do the second piece of the tutorial, but today we're doing this one here. Yeah, thank you, Charles. I think that was your question. Okay, so I'll give you some time to complete this step. As before, you can post your questions on the Q&A, post your questions on the chat window, and we will be back at 12 p.m. noon PST time to do the uploading and translating piece of our code. Let me pause. And, yeah. Okay, so see you in 1 hour and 40 minutes. You have some time to complete this. Thank you. I'm recording. Okay, now it's good. So let's start with session number 3, upload translation of modules. And we did check already if there's any question. We answered most of the questions during the break. So let's move to the next one. Now it's about the data management controller for creating buckets, uploading files, and listing the buckets and objects that we have. And also the translation job controller. So let's start with that. Let's go for that piece of the code. So we just finished the OAuth section, and next we are going to the upload to OSS. So OSS is where we store the files. That's where we keep the data when we upload to Autodesk. You can imagine OSS as a file storage system, but it's very simple, right? It's just for storing objects under buckets, and you can see that as folders and files. When you create a bucket where you are going to store the files, you have to specify a retention policy. It means that for how long should we keep the data. So transient means that every file that you upload to the bucket will be deleted after 24 hours. Temporary means 30 days. And persistent means that we're not going to delete. You have to delete if you want to, or the file will just live there. So this is important in case you don't want data to be residing on Autodesk and you don't want to keep that for, to manage that. You are just uploading, extracting some information and moving to the next one. You don't care about the file. So you decide how long should we keep the data. And the buckets, the folder names should contain only letters and numbers, and it's up to 128 characters. So this is important to avoid mistakes when creating the bucket names. And this sample is, let's go to the .NET Core. So this is the OSS controller that will create the buckets and list them for us. So the first endpoint here, and I'm going to skip this one, I'm going to move to the create bucket first. So this is the endpoint to create buckets. And if I maximize this, you see that when we create the bucket, we prefix the bucket name with your client ID. So all bucket names under your account will have your client ID as a prefix and then the actual bucket name. The reason we do that is that the bucket name must be unique across all of the accounts. And we know that the client ID is unique. So if we get client ID and the bucket name you have, well, we know that this is unique. So let's say you create a bucket with a name test, which is very common, right? So test is already created by someone. But as we prefix them with the client ID, there is no problem. And you have to also notice that when you create a bucket, you define where the data will be stored. So for this sample, we are using US. And you can define that you want to keep the data somewhere else, like EMEA. So that's up to you to decide and up to you to change the code if you have to. And as I said, we are using transient retention policy. So everything that you upload here will be deleted after 24 hours. You can change this to temporary or persistent. It's up to you. And this code up here is to list all the buckets and all the objects on the buckets. And last, at the very bottom, we have a code to actually upload the file. So this is getting the file from the browser to the server and from the server to Autodesk right here. You have to notice that this code to upload buckets, to upload object, is not using resumable, which is just a bit more extra code to do, but it's more stable. But we're not doing this here for simplicity, so it's just uploading as a single chunk or as a single upload, which works well for small files like up to 30, 40 megabytes should work fine. But if you have like 1 gig file, that will not work. You have to move this to a resumable upload, which is the best approach. And just moving back to the list buckets and objects, you see that this code is returning this tree node. This is not Autodesk tree, it's just a generic web tree browser to show a tree on the tree side on the left. And the way it works is that when it's the first time that it's been called, we know that there is nothing there, so we are returning all the buckets. The second time, it's calling with, you are expanding one of the buckets, so we are going to return the objects instead. And if you look here, because of the way the API works, is that we have pagination, meaning we have, if we have a lot of buckets or a lot of objects, we have to return to get several pages of list of buckets and objects. Again, for simplicity, this sample is only getting the first page, so the first 100 buckets and the first 100 objects per bucket. You can extend this code later to do pagination and get you all the buckets and all the objects inside each bucket. But keep this in mind, we're just getting the first 100. Okay, so that's the code. Let's implement this now. We are going to, under the controller folder, create the new OSS controller and copy this content there. So let's go here to our project under controllers and add new controller and select API controller and hit add. and the name should be OSS, and hit add. And let's replace with this. All right, so that's the endpoint to get us all the to return the buckets. So let's see if this is working quickly. So as we did before, the way to execute this is if we get the endpoint that we're trying to implement and go to our browser and localhost, and let's call this one. And as this is getting the list of buckets, if you look at the way the API is implemented, we have to say, okay, we're getting the first one. Yeah, string ID. Hash. Oh, I have to URL encode this, right? So that's a good chance for us to learn how to debug, right? So our code is running. Let's put a breakpoint in here. So as I click on this gray bar, there is this red dot that if I try to run again, you go here and see that my ID is actually no, it's not getting the information from here, right? So let's try again, pass something, and let's run this, and you see that the ID is now the letter. It's just because hash needs to be URL encoded. And oh, just try yourself. Let's get this hash, and so it's actually %23. So let's try this, and hit again, and oops, let's stop, and oh, come on, work with me. Okay, now the ID is actually hash, and that should get us the list of all the buckets we have, which right now it's empty. So we know that this code is working. It's returning an array. The square brackets here means that this is a JSON, and the square brackets means that this is an array. And as there is nothing here, we know that the list of buckets is empty, as expected, right? This is a very new application. We don't have any buckets there. So, okay, all good, all working. Let's go to the next one. We finished the controller, and let's go to the translate controller. So every file that we upload to Forge needs to be translated before we can view it. So the translation is the extraction process, where we extract the thumbnails, the information, the metadata, and the viewables, the geometry for that file. So that's the translation process. That translation is done by the model derivative API. And if you click here, you can see all the files that we support. So if you let me open this on a new tab, and that should show us all the extensions we support. All of the CAD formats from Autodesk and from several competitors are here. So let's click on the .NET Core, and let's see what this code is doing. So the code right here is just saying, let's translate a file, and I want to extract 2D and 3D from that file. And if I look here, it's just posting the job to translate. And this is just defining the structure. So there is nothing else here. It's just the post translation for 2D and 3D. That's the default SVF. SVF is the file format for the viewer. And if you want to just do 3D, you can change here. Or if you want to translate to a different format, let's say you want to extract from RVT to IFC, for instance, you can just say IFC, for instance, right? That will work the same way. So how should we do it? Copy and go here and create a new controller, API controller, and hit add. And that should be model derivative controller. Hit add. Okay, and let's paste in here, and we have our code. So those are the two steps that we are completing at this time. The OSS to upload and list buckets and objects, and the mod derivative for translation. To actually post a job, we have to first upload and then post a job for translation. So we will do that on the next step. So that should be it for this step. And if you have any questions on this one, please let me know. And we are going to come back in 1 hour and a half again to complete the last one. But now is your time to do the add data management controller to create buckets, upload and list, and add the translation job controller under the mod derivative controller. Any questions here? So as before, you can post your questions using the Q&A or chat or other things or other means. And we'll be back at 2 p.m. Pacific time, which is again roughly in 1 hour and 45 minutes to complete the last step, how to load those models into the viewer. And if you have any questions, use the Q&A for it. Okay, so see you in a moment then. Thank you. All right, so welcome to the session 4, loading models into the viewer. So that's the last session of the day. We're going to complete our application. And let's see if we have any questions. I see that Brian raised his hand. Let me. Oh, do you have a question? Or Scott? Let me allow you to talk. Scott, you can unmute.
Hey, Augusto.
Hi, Scott.
I don't have the www root, and I was just curious if you could go over how to re-add that.
Sure, we will do that step right now.
Thank you.
Okay, cool. Thank you. Any other question that I can help with? Okay, so let's go to the next session. So this is about the static pages that we have on our application. That's where we host the HTML, the JavaScript, CSS, and the supporting files that we need for this application to run. And let's quickly do it, coming from the tutorial. So let me switch here. And I hope I'm sharing the right screen. I think I do. Yeah. Okay, so let's move to the bottom, show on the viewer. As always, we select the language, let's say .NET Core. And the first step here is to create the www root folder that Scott was talking about. So let's go here on the project, right click and add new folder, and as simple as that, www root. When I hit enter, you see that the icon of the wroot folder will change, meaning that I'm doing the right thing, right? This is a predefined folder for ASP.NET application, and that's where we host the static files that will be served without execution of the code inside them. So inside that folder, we also have to create a few additional folders. So the JS folder for JS files, the CSS folder for CSS files, and following this structure here. Again, this is it's all about standard, right? To keep our code organized. So that's why we're suggesting this, and that's also how we do on our samples. So that's why we're doing here as well. So it should be easier for you later to reuse our samples, and we use that based on the application that you have. Okay, so that's our core piece. We have the wroot folder with the files. We don't have the files yet. That's our next step. So let's go for it. So the first step here is to create the index.html. So this tutorial was created maybe 3 years ago when we had the version 6 of the viewer. And we had a significant change from version 6 to v7. So that's why you can select the version if you have something that you must be using v6 for whatever reason. But if there is no reason, if you just want to use the latest version, which is the best, let's use v7. When we look at the code, there's a lot of additional libraries that we're using, Bootstrap, jQuery, and other things to help us on our code. But the ones that are really important for the viewer itself are those two here, the CSS for the viewer and the JavaScript for the viewer. There is a few things to notice, right? We are using the viewer 7-point*, meaning that any minor version inside the major version v7, it's okay for this sample to run. So if we develop this sample today, and if we go to the documentation, and let's a good chance to review that as well. Let's go to the Forge website, and if we go under documentation and we check on the viewer right here, and we can see the change history for all the versions we had, v2, v3, etc. And we are right now on v7, 7.40, 7.40, right? So we have 40 minor releases inside v7. What we suggest is that when you are developing your application, to use the latest possible version, and when you are ready to move to production, then you hard code the version. So let's complete this step and review this file with a larger screen. So what we have to do here is to create the index.html and copy this content there. So let's go to the wroot, add new item, and we are going to select the HTML page, and let's call it index, and it comes with a basic content. Let's get rid of this and paste our new content. So as I was saying, we have the v7.star, right? So that's what we should be using during development. And when you are very close to release your application, you come here and say, now I want to use 7.40.0 or whatever the version you have. So now you know that you not have compatibility issues later. So you change here and here. But I would not recommend you to do it at the very beginning, because you are still developing, right? You are flexible to adjust to the latest version. We are releasing versions of the viewer every 2 or 3 weeks. So it's important for you to test with the latest possible version. But when you go to production, hard code the version. It's important to avoid surprises. And the rest of the code is just showing the tree here with the list of buckets. And here is showing the viewer, and there's a div, and this is just a pop-up to ask you to create the bucket name. So that's the index file. Let's save this. And the next step is to create the main.css. So let's copy this and go to our project inside the CSS folder and add a new item again. In this case will be a CSS cascading style sheet. Where is it? Yeah, if you don't, sometimes it's a bit hard to find here. Style sheet here. Main. Let's get rid of this and replace and save. So this is just no basic formatting of our page. And that's the tree that will generate the tree on the side. This is not a Forge component, it's just a tree to show the elements. So let's copy and create our file so I can see how it looks like right here. So that will be a JavaScript, and let's call it Forge tree. and that's the content. So what it's doing here is as soon as the document is ready, as soon as the page is open, it's going to set up some things, create buttons and create the upload. This is the code that will, from the browser, call the server to create the bucket. This is the code to list the tree, and we have some icons for the tree to render that. We have sort and context menu. And last, we have the types of the context menu, the right click on the tree. And this is the upload code from the browser to the server. And last but not least, the viewer piece. So that's the viewer code. This is what we use on most of our samples, how to initialize the viewer. So let's create a new item again, JavaScript Forge viewer. And what it's doing here is saying launch the viewer. This is the URN. So the URN is the unique identification for a file. The URN is created with the bucket key and the object name, which we know is unique. Both are unique. And this is going to initialize the viewer on that div element, and will load one of the documents inside the viewer. You see that what we are loading on the viewer is the default geometry, which can be different depending on the model. Let's say we have a Revit file, that will be the 3D view. If we have a DWG file, that will be the model space. So we have different default views for different files. And this is the code to get the token from the client, from the server, to show on the viewer. So now we have the index, main, forest tree, and forest viewer, and we are ready to run our app. So let's click on running the app. We have a few sample files here if you don't have anything. And if you're doing, that's how we execute the application. And if you're running .NET Core, it's as simple as click on this Express button, or we can select different browsers to run. Let's say I want to open with one of my browsers, or just run it and open with the default browser. So let's run it. That should open my browser. Where is it? Here. So you see there is now localhost. I don't have to type anything extra because the .NET Core knows that it has to go to the www.root folder and get the index on that folder, which is here. I don't have any buckets yet, so let's create a new bucket. It's showing me this page just to explain what it is. And let's say I want to name it my first bucket. Doesn't matter what name I type in here. I mean, it doesn't need to be unique here because my code is going to prefix with my client ID. So let's go ahead and create a bucket. So the code is smart enough to add the prefix when you create and then remove the prefix when you list. So it's clear for you, right? The actual name, it's a bit bigger. So if I expand, I don't have any files inside yet because I have to upload. So let's right click and upload a file. And I think I have one here. Let me get a Revit sample file. So 5 megabytes should be okay for this testing. Should be quick enough. Okay, so now it's refreshing. Now it's my file. So the first time I click, it's going to say, okay, this file is not translated. I just upload this file is not ready. So let's start the translation. It will use the mod derivative to trigger the job and start the translation process. Let's start translation again. So something is not right. So let's see what did I do wrong. Well, if something is happening, that's what we should do. We should go to the post job. In this case, that's what we are triggering there. Let's click here and start translation. And if we hit F10, we can move line by line and see what's happening. So that's here. Here is when we post the translation job. And okay, so what's wrong? Oh, I guess I know what it is. Oh, yeah. Okay, so it's a good point, right? To see that my application trial expired, meaning that my account is no longer valid for this kind of testing because I have a very my trial ended, so I cannot continue my testing. So you may have this kind of problem. So you know what kind of message you will get. The message is quite clear, right? So your trial expired. So I have to either I have to move to a subscription, or I need to use a different account for this thing, for this application. So let me get something here. Give me just a sec. Let me replace my credential. I'm just doing this out of screen because I don't want to share my other client ID with you. Okay, so let's see if this will work now. No, it's still expired. All right, so let me. Oh, thank you, Joao. So is that Gmail account as well, right?
This is my testing account also.
Is this an employee account or Gmail
Oh, no,
account?
no. Gmail.
Okay, okay, thank you. It's always fun when we try that several times. It does work great, and when we're doing a demo, it doesn't work great. But yeah, thank you. Properties. So let's replace the client ID. He shared one with me, and we are going to refresh that later. So don't reuse it. Let's move this away and click run. So as now I have a new client ID. Again, there is should not be any buckets on my account. So I have to. Do you have any buckets here? Oh yeah, you do have a few buckets, right? So it doesn't matter. Let me create a new bucket and go ahead and create. Okay, that's my first new bucket. Let's upload a file to it. The same file and open. So once it's done, it's going to refresh the tree and I can see my file. Let's start again. And okay, now it's translating. If I click again, it should show that translation is still in progress, 0%. And if I keep clicking, it should refresh soon. So this sample, it's very basic, so it's not doing the webhook callback to tell you when the translation is done. So when you click again, it will retry, and when the model is ready, it should be here. This model is very simple, and it should be really fast to translate. So most of the time that we wait is actually the queuing process, because there's a lot of other jobs waiting. It's just waiting for that. So this is our model, a very, very basic model. Should be very quick to translate, and I can see them here. Interesting things to notice, right? So this is a Revit file, meaning that when we open the file, it's going to open the default view, which is the 3D view in this case. But if I go to this document browser, I can see my other views. So in this case, I can see that this file has only one 3D view, which is okay, right? So you know what you're looking for. But it's sometimes when you are looking for 3D files like DWG, the default view will be a 2D file, not a 3D view. All right, so that should be it for this section. So we just created the index.html, the main CSS, the JavaScript for the tree, and the JavaScript for the viewer. So that's all we have to do for this step. And let's see if you have any questions here, because that's our last session. So if you have any other questions, that's a good time to raise your hand or type in. So while you're typing your questions, so today was the first day with the upload, translate, and view. Tomorrow we have another one where we are going to access models on BIM 360 or Fusion. And it's very similar, but it's using a three-legged approach. So that's tomorrow. Thursday, we're going to use the how to extend the viewer and build dashboards. And Friday, how to use design automation to modify models. So there is a question here. Can you review the step where you updated the index file and changed the version of the viewer? I caught one line, but not the other one. Yes, definitely. So let's go back here to the, let's maximize this and go to the index. So what we are looking for are, there is a comment here, Autodesk Forge viewer files, and that's the CSS for the viewer, and that's the JavaScript for the viewer. And on both cases, you see the 7.star, right? So in this case, we are always using the latest version of latest minor version on the 7. So let's say if you want to use the latest version always, you can just say star, because that will always use the latest version. But that's not safe, because we may upgrade to version 7, or sorry, version 8, and then your code may have problems. So it's better to always hard code at least the major version. But the best is to hard code the major, minor, and patch version. So right now should be 7.40.0. And I can check that if I go back to my application, and if I go to the browser and open the developer tools right here and go to the console, I can type in viewer version. So we are right now on 7.4.40.0. So just for fun, let's say I'm going to move to 12.star, for instance, and I have to update here as well, 12.star. So let's say that's the version that I want to use, because I don't know, that contains the fixes I need. So if I run my code again and load my model, I don't have to translate again. The model is already there, was already translated. So viewer version, you see 7.12.2. So that was the there is a patch version here, 2 patches, so 0, 1, and 2. Right, so we can do that on our code and say, okay, let me use the 7.12.0, and that will be very precise. So that's the best way to do it. 3 major, minor, and patch. That's the ideal way. So if I go back to my application, to my app, oops, what happened? Let me share again. Oops. Okay, am I sharing the right thing? Yes. Okay. Come on. Okay. If I refresh now and open my model, still working fine? I think so. So let me viewer version, now 7.12.0. So that's the best way to do it.
You're not sharing the screen.
No. Oh, what is happening? Okay, give me a sec. Wait. Zoom is crazy. Zoom, where are you? Okay, share, share, and share, and share. Okay. Okay, yes, now I'm sharing, right? Yes, I think I do. Okay, that's the version again, right? 7.12.0. So now we have the hard-coded version 7.12.0. Let me go back to the star. That's what we have on the tutorial today. All right, that was your question. Thank you, James Farquhar. Scott is asking, can you review the last step of running the application? Yes, of course. So let me stop again. And if we go back to the tutorial and come here, so it's essentially just click on this play button here. And that should start the application and open the browser. But if you want to change that, you can click on the drop down and select, let's say, a different browser. So you want to use, if you want to use Internet Explorer, Edge, or something else. If you have other options here, but by default, just hit play. That should compile the code and open the browser. And if it's all working well, you should see a list of buckets here. Actually, you should see empty at the beginning, and then you can create a bucket. Another question from Scott: does it typically take long? Mine has been loading for 30 seconds. It's usually really fast. So if it's loading and it's not running, click on these three dots on Chrome, go to More Tools, Developer Tools, and go to the console right here. There is a usually what's new and console. You should see some error message here. So tell us what you see here. So you are getting a crash report bundle. Yes, so there is an error message, Scott. This is not ours. This is something else running on your Chrome from the error message that you are typing. So what I would suggest you is to try a different browser. Maybe that's it. But it seems that you have an extension on your Chrome that is preventing the code from working. I don't know what kind of extension is that. Source map. I don't know. Can you try a different browser? Maybe that would work. Anything but the Internet Explorer, which is mostly not supported anymore. Oh, Firefox should work well. So any other questions? Let's see, there is a chat window. Okay, answer your question, yes. All right, any other questions? Anything else that we can help you with? There is a question here. Sirinivas, can you please send the recording of the video? Yes, we are going to send all of the recordings. Can you just wait until the end of the week? We are going to send one email with all the recordings, today, tomorrow, Thursday, and Friday. And then you can just watch whichever you want. So what else? Where else you can get support? So we monitor Stack Overflow. So that's the to-go place, the standard to-go place for technical questions. And you can post Forge questions there. Just use the Autodesk Forge tag. If you don't know which API, if you know the API, you can just say for Autodesk Viewer, Model Derivative, or Design Automation, the API that you are using, and should work well. We answer all the questions on Stack Overflow. It may take a few hours or maybe a day to get to your question, but we are going to answer all the questions there. So that's the best place because we answer and other people that are also using Forge can answer your question as well. Yes, so yeah, yes, okay. So there is just a follow-up question from about the recording. We are going to send before the end of the week. It's just that we have to collect all the recordings from Zoom and may take some time to get the recording. But as soon as we get them, we're going to send to everyone. So don't worry, we're going to send all the recordings for this class. And if you're really looking to get today's class, you can get that from the YouTube from last time. So I think today we did these view hubs, right? So there is all of the classes are there. Let me pause here.
models. This is the second day.
Yes, that's tomorrow. Yeah, you're right. Let me get the other one here. That's the one. So let me pause. Okay, so just search for this on YouTube, and you should get the recording. So this is exactly the same thing, but was I did some cleanup, right? So that's why it's just 19 minutes. You know, so you can just watch it and pause when you need, but it's the exact same thing. You can just 20 minutes, no delays. Oops, sorry, come back here. Let me move here and move back here. All right, so any other questions? Okay, so Scott saying that was an issue with a breakpoint. Oh, okay, okay, got it. Another breakpoint. Thank you. Done and done. All right, thanks, Scott. Thank you for fixing quickly. Okay, so that's it. Thank you for watching today. What I will do now, I will leave this Zoom running for additional 10 minutes, just in case you have any other questions to post. So you can post that on the Q&A. But otherwise, see you tomorrow on the second day of the training. So tomorrow it will be about BIM 360, and as just like today, we have Node and .NET options. So we are going to follow the .NET version tomorrow again. So yeah, see you tomorrow, and thank you for joining today. Thank you.